sent out for a sour, and a Nebula Haze cut came back with it late 2000. I've said this many times to people that know me, whether it's clearly not a bragging point. I grew them both for years, preferably the Nebula Haze, because I couldn't sell the sour locally. Mm-hmm. And back in those days, if you could sell locally, you were selling locally.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't all about an extra
$300 or $400
on a freaking, and waiting for your money.
Right.
Because, it was all about selling locally, and nobody really cared for the sour.
Right.
It wasn't a big deal around.
Agreed. Well, I think a lot of people exaggerate this, like, if you have a wide breadth of strain experience. Sour diesel is not that skunky.
It's not that skunky.
It never really was that skunky, and everybody's like describing it like it's some roadkill.
No.
Like, or something, and it's like, man, I remember when I first got it, I grew sour next to original diesel, and then I grew this Chem 91, which goes around as the Doctus Chem 91, but it wasn't mine, it was just a clone I got that it was another mislabeled diesel of some sort, I'm not sure what. And they were all nearly identical, very similar. And I remember describing it as like a waxy kind of, like, the diesel taste is like, it's more of the smell of diesel after it's been on your hands for a couple hours.
100%.
Not like,
in the bag.
Yeah, exactly.
When you break it up, and I don't know how to describe it.
It has some skunkiness, don't get me wrong.
It's a perfume, though.
Yeah.
It's not a skunk. Like, it's a perfume. It's a part of the skunk palette, but it doesn't have, like you said, roadkill. It doesn't have what I would attach to being like offensive odor.
Right.
Diesel was never offensive to me.
No, it was smooth.
Smooth and sweet, and people are like, at least sour D, not diesel.
Chem
I gotta
Dog,
watch what I say,
Chem D.
because now there's a billion diesels.
Right.
I'm talking sour D. When we grew sour D, it was fucking sour D. There was two names for it.
That's right.
Like, all these other ones.
Chems were what were known as like the raunchy of those family, 100%. And especially Chem D with its just that halitosis hash plant smell. I mean, that's where that smell comes from, is hash plants.
100%.
That whole Chem Dog family, Chem itself, the halitosis, that's hash plant to me, because I was buying hash plant seeds from Canada, and I remember I grew this one, the Redbeck hash plant, and I grew the Quebec hash plant and Friesland and M44, some a bunch of early flowering outdoor things and hash plant crosses, because that's what they grew in Quebec. And I spent like 4 months in Quebec after high school because half my family's from up there. So I stayed with my aunt, and at the time I was thinking about moving to either Vancouver Island or Quebec to grow weed, because you didn't really get in trouble up there. And there was a lot of people doing it, and I knew I could like slip under. So
I would put Sensi Star up there with early chems for being offensive. And you want to talk about skunk in your pocket and not being able to go to the grocery store with the nug on you, that'd have been Sensi Star. I mean, sour was definitely loud. Yeah. It just didn't have that sort of like, I guess offensive is the only word I could put on. It was always more inviting, and it always smelled much crazier upon breakup. Yeah. Like, the bags themselves smelled good too, yes, but the breakup is what defines sour. There's a lot of depth in that flavor when you get in there, and it's really interesting.
But just a bag of it, I mean, even like a really good bag of diesel might even smell a little bit hayish right when you first crack the bag open.
Usually. Yeah. Usually.
But then when you like get in there and break it open, you're like, okay, there's all the smell and everything else. But the whole bag may not be like the skunkiest thing ever. I mean, maybe to some people compared to other strains, but to us that have seen like, let's say, a pound of Albert Walker, which isn't skunk necessarily either, but it's very offensive. It definitely hits you in the face, and you're like, whoa, what's this?
I mean, it would be what you smell in the room if you had 5 pounds of different weed and you had a pound of Albert Walker. It's going to cut through everything.
Exactly.
There's certain strains that just do it. Sour wasn't ever that to me. I think a lot of it was the high. The high was significantly better than most of the hybrids that were on the market for a real,
It was an enjoyable smoke.
Really good smoke.
It just really, it's really smooth. It's like a mashed potatoes. You just take a bite and you're like, that was good. And mashed potatoes aren't particularly complex or anything like that, but the right ratio of all the good ingredients that could make mashed potatoes make it one of probably the most addictive and hard to put down foods.
It might be the best thing on your Thanksgiving plate, and like you said, is mashed potatoes.
And it mixes well with everything else too.
Everything.
And that's what makes some things is they don't need to be necessarily the most offensive or loud or this or that to become a favorite. It's that they're palatable to everybody's difference in opinion.
Agreed. There's a lot of people talk about sour with a little bit of I don't know. There's a lot of cuts we're now finding out now that everyone has a microphone and they're allowed to talk. Like, it seems that there's a billion different cuts.
I don't think any of those people can prove that they've had it for 20 years. So it's like, unless you were the guy that held it and then, moved next.
I will say it was a pain of a plant, and of the few plants that I sort of believe in the genetic drift concept with, it's been plants that pre-flower that have posed problems down the line for me and holding for too long. And Sour D definitely pre-flowered. If done wrong, she had those traits like grapefruit from Steve up there. That's another one that sort of like breaks down over the time. If you don't give that. That's why a lot of people, they just re-veg their grapefruit from flower and all of a sudden she's back.
Right.
There's a few strains like that. I would classify Sour D plants as a grower as falling into that category of having a bit of like genetic instability that you didn't see in a lot of other stuff that has remained unfettered.
Got it.
My 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.